Let's start. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to yet another session of Sapient Conversations. As we celebrate our 74th Independence Day, there has always been a lot of talk about India's defense preparedness and its capabilities vis-a-vis China. This chatter has actually gone up a couple of notches higher in the recent times because of the unfortunate situation that has happened in the Galvan Valley. We thought, why not get some perspective about it? And we're contemplating to do a session for our colleagues within Sapient. At the last moment, we thought that why not share this wisdom with all of us, all of you, rather than believing in what we hear 24/7 on the news debates. Let's hear someone who is passionate about defense and someone who can talk and share facts with us. So without wasting any time, I would like to hand over the proceeding to my senior colleague, Amit Basu, to introduce the speaker and take the proceedings forward. Basu, sir, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Pallav, and a very happy 74th Independence Day to all of you. We at Sapient are really thrilled to welcome a personality with a multifaceted, multi-talented personality. And he's a person with a lot of interest in matters of defense and geopolitics. Let me give some background about our personality who's going to talk today. He takes pride in calling himself a Fauji ka beta. Dad is basically associated with Indian Air Force as a fighter pilot, and he spent some time in Kashmir before he moved to Delhi and completed his education. Around 26 years of corporate life in various parts of India and abroad, and with companies of national and international repute like Franklin Templeton, Goldman Sachs, and last assignment being at Axis Mutual Fund, which is among the top 10 AMCs. He was a founding member of that team. In 2018, he called it quits and started a journey which he's still discovering. So that's pretty interesting that we have someone who is on a journey where he's going to discover something which is still not known. But I think the insights about geopolitics, the intricacies of relationship between nations, and the kind of information he has. Please put your hand together for welcoming Mr. Karan Datta on the show. And Karan, welcome to the show from the entire Sapient family.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Amit, for calling me over. Pallav, thanks for inviting me. Amit and Rupa, Dhruv, Paresh. So just very kind of you to call me on your platform at Sapient. And I just think that the timing is appropriate, Independence Day. And we take some of these things for granted. And I just think that doing such a session on Independence Day is really, really relevant and appropriate. And I think for you all to call me over as a speaker on this topic, that's really, really kind of you. Generally, I've been called to speak on mutual funds, but this time I'll try my best to do justice on a topic which, yes, you're right, Amit. I've been very passionate about it, and actually now for about over 8 years now, in various capacities, I do kind of speak about it, or at least read a lot about it. And the reason, and before I get into my slides and stuff like that, I just wanted to, set the ball rolling and set the agenda on this. We take independence for granted. And it's something that, we just believe that it's our birthright. What we forget is that we've had 300 years of British rule, and we've had 700 years of the Mughal rule. So for about 1,000 years, we've not really been independent. It's just the last 70 odd years that India's achieved its independence. So with that background, I'll quickly just switch on to my slides. And Amit or Pallav, in case you can't see or anything, just let me know. I'm quickly just getting on to share screen.
I would request everybody else to actually shut the video so that the screen is clear for everybody.
So just a quick okay from either Pallav or Amit, if you all can see the screen, and then I'll start. If that's
good.
Okay, like I said, thanks a lot for putting this together. Perfect time, and perhaps the right occasion also, because there's just so much happening in our country. So for the next 1 hour or so, what I want to do is spend a lot of time around photos, maps, a bit of geography, a little bit of a history lesson. And all of this, I think, is important for us to just, open our minds as to why would this be happening, whatever is happening today. And is there a precedent to this? What do we think could happen in the future? And the reason why I say that is because this has not happened for the first time in our country. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. We've been independent, like I said, for 74 years. But you'll be surprised to know how many wars we've already fought in these 70 odd years. Take a guess how many wars we fought. And typically, the answers I get are 3 and 4, but you'll be surprised to know that in these 74 years, we've already fought 6 wars. It's 47, 62, 65, 67, 71, 99. And I'm not taking 2020 into account. So, already in this very short period, India's already kind of fought 6 wars. And it kind of, sets the mind rolling as to why would this be happening. So that's the agenda, that's the background. And I'll obviously spend time on what's been happening in the current state of affairs, as well as what's the background. But like I said, lots of history, lots of maps, lots of geography lessons. So do keep kind of pace with my laser out here, because a lot of stuff I like to show on the maps. And with that, I'll kind of dive right into my slides. And here goes the first slide. So I'll start with the Indian political map, and it's a map that I have grown up on. It's a map all of you on this call would have grown up on. It's the political map of India. There's nothing extraordinary in this map. It's what the country is extraordinary, but the map is something that we've grown up on. But I still wanted to, show the map for all of us and just kind of refresh for a second what the map looks like. And I wanted you all to focus on 1 or 2 areas. First of all, by the way, India is the only country in the world which has an ocean named after it. It's called the Indian subcontinent. And there's no other country in the world which has an ocean named after it. So basically, अपने देश की विशालता दिखाता है कि अपना इतना विशाल देश है कि एक ocean अपने नाम पे. In fact, we are called the subcontinent. And many times I tell my friends कि अपना complexity is like that of Europe. We are actually more complex than Europe. Europe as a continent versus India as a country. I think India is much more complex than Europe. So let's just look at the map. I'm based out of Delhi. This is where I am. A lot of my friends today are Bombay, Pune, and from all over the country. 2-3 things. First, before we go into the country, I wanted to share with you that we have 2 very friendly neighbors. On our western border, we have a friendly neighbor called Pakistan. And on our eastern borders, we have this country called China. Not very friendly guys, both of them, but we can't choose our neighbors. So here they are. So this is for all our future conversations. This is the Western front and this is the Eastern front. By the way, when Amit was introducing me, he probably did mention, I've spent a lot of time in Jammu and Kashmir, 6 years. My dad was posted there. He was commanding a fighter base out there. So 6 years I spent in Srinagar. Really, really beautiful place. I've studied there. So this is what the map of Jammu and Kashmir in our political map looks like. Please remember this map for a bit. And then as we come down, we share borders, etc., and we'll spend some time on that. But look at the विशालता. अपने देश की विशालता देखिए. एक तरफ नॉर्थ ईस्ट है, अरुणाचल, असम, नागालैंड, मेघालय. एक तरफ आपके पास गुजरात, गोवा. यहाँ पे आपको बीचेस भी मिलेंगे, हिमालय भी मिलेगा, सैंड भी मिलेगा, राजस्थान का डेजर्ट भी मिलेगा. And I think one of the most uniquely beautiful countries on planet Earth. So this is India, and this is Jammu and Kashmir, as we are aware of it on the political map of India. Next map is a country that I'm not sure how many of you have been to this country. This is the map of Pakistan. This is what Pakistan looks like. By the way, I wanted to take you through a little bit deeper into Pakistan today. I'm not sure on this call about how many of you all have ever traveled to Pakistan, but there was a time when I was based out of Singapore. My closest friend was from Pakistan. It's funny that we used to watch Indo-Pak cricket matches together, and both of us used to be very, very mellowed and very nicely we used to clap for each other's teams. But a good friend of mine, he came from Lahore, but this is some time ago. But today I'll just spend some time on the map of Pakistan. Let's just spend 2 minutes on this part of Pakistan right now, which is Baluchistan. By the way, over the last 5 to 6 years, I'm sure all of you are hearing a lot about Balochistan, whether on social media, on Twitter, in the front page of the newspaper, in a back page of the newspaper. But I'm sure for most people on this call, you're hearing a lot about Balochistan these days, and suddenly it's in the papers. In fact, Kulbhushan Yadav was picked up from Gwadar, kind of close, I mean, which is in Balochistan. So I'm just saying Balochistan certainly is a name that is coming up quite often in our conversation. And by the way, इसका size भी आप देखिए, बलूचिस्तान काफी बड़ा है पाकिस्तान के पूरे नक्शे के मुताबिक, और मैं आपसे बस ये दिखाना चाहता था कि इसका जो नक्शा है ये है बड़ा देश, बड़ा पार्ट है पाकिस्तान का, and along with Balochistan is Sindh. Now, if you add Balochistan and Sindh, that's almost close to 45% of Pakistan. Look at the land, look at the area that Balochistan and Sindh cover. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you is both of them are disputed areas. Both of them are conflicted areas. Both of them, actually, Balochistan at the time of independence was not supposed to be part of Pakistan. It was supposed to be a separate country. ये देश ही अलग होने वाला था. अब मैं हिस्ट्री में नहीं जाऊंगा 1947 में क्या हुआ एंड व्हाई डिड बलूचिस्तान बिकम पार्ट ऑफ पाकिस्तान, वो अलग स्टोरी है. बट आज की डेट में बलूचिस्तान और सिंध दोनों ही डिस्प्यूटेड एरिया हैं और दोनों लगभग पाकिस्तान के 45% एरिया कवर करते हैं. सो दिस इज बलूचिस्तान. और आगे वाले डिस्कशन में अगले आधे पौने घंटे में इसका नाम काफी आएगा क्योंकि यहाँ पे एक पोर्ट वगैरह भी है जिसके बारे में बात करूंगा. सो ये है बलूचिस्तान, ये है सिंध 45%. अब थोड़ा ऊपर बढ़ते हैं और पंजाब की तरफ जाते हैं. ये असली पाकिस्तान यहाँ पर है. पंजाब जितने भी शरीफ हैं, मुशर्रफ, नवाज शरीफ, ये शरीफ, वो शरीफ, सारे जितने पाकिस्तानी शरीफ होते हैं वो सब पंजाब से ही आते हैं. एंड मोस्ट ऑफ देम आर बेस्ड आउट. इनफैक्ट आई डोंट थिंक द पाकिस्तानी आर्मी और फॉर दैट मैटर the Air Force actually hires anyone from outside of Punjab. They definitely don't make them generals from beyond Punjab. That's how focused and controlled Punjab is. But very quickly, I want to take you to Lahore. This is Lahore on the red dot, and this is Amritsar. Lahore, Amritsar, 100 kilometers difference. And if someone in a fighter plane took off, it'd probably take them less than 3 minutes to cross each other. Lahore, Amritsar. That's how close the two locations are. The languages are very similar. Food is very similar. Virtually everything has a lot of things in common. That's how close they are to each other. But let's just go further up. This is northwest frontier. This is like the Wild West, the Texas of Pakistan. This is where the tribal areas are. But today I want you to focus on this purple patch. This patch. By the way, this is also the Pakistani political map. Okay, I want you to focus on this purple patch today. And this purple patch kind of looks similar to this purple patch because they are the same. So अपने political map में भी ये patch है, पाकिस्तान के political map में भी ये patch है, तो ये है किसका? And in the next couple of slides, I wanted to just spend a little more time on the actual ground positions in Jammu and Kashmir. So remember, this is what our map looks like. This is what Pakistan's map looks like. But the actual ground position today, or at least for some time now, is this. This is the real Jammu and Kashmir. And I'll kind of explain this in a little bit. So पहले तो आप ये देखिए कि first things first, कि जो सफेद portion है, the white portion, that's the portion that we have control of right now. And जो आप green portion देख रहे हैं, ये अभी आज की डेट में पाकिस्तान occupied कश्मीर है. And इसका नाम गिलगिट बाल्टिस्तान के नाम से जाना जाता है. पाकिस्तान occupied कश्मीर भी बहुत पेचीदा तरीके से पाकिस्तान occupied कश्मीर बना. 47 के टाइम पे ये अगेन ज्यादा मैं हिस्ट्री में नहीं जाना चाहूंगा, बट ये एक्चुअली होना नहीं चाहिए था पाकिस्तान ऑक्यूपाइड कश्मीर. ये गिलगिट बाल्टिस्तान का एरिया by some deep state British thought process finally went to Pakistan. But for now मैं उसके बारे में ज्यादा डिटेल नहीं करूंगा. ये याद रखिएगा कि ये गिलगिट बाल्टिस्तान के नाम से जाना चाहता है. रियल एरिया हम लोग ये कंट्रोल करते हैं, जम्मू एंड कश्मीर. नाउ टू थिंग्स आई वांट यू टू फोकस ऑन इन दिस मैप. बहुत जरूरी है कि स्ट्रेंजली बहुत एक अजीब हरकत हुई 63 में, राइट आफ्टर 62 वॉर. which is the only war India has lost ever. The only war we lost was 62. उसके भी बहुत कारण है, but 62 की वॉर होते ही 63 में ये जो आप लाल पोर्शन देख रहे हैं, पाकिस्तान ने जाके चाइना को पकड़ा दिया. वैसे भी ये पाकिस्तान ऑक्यूपाइड कश्मीर इनका था नहीं, गिलगिट बाल्टिस्तान के नाम पे था. जम्मू एंड कश्मीर केम इनटू इंडियाज ऑक्यूपेशन, बट थ्रू सम डीप स्टेट ब्रिटिश इंटेंशन इट वेंट टू पाकिस्तान. अब पहले उनका है नहीं, ऊपर से इन्होंने ये पोर्शन चाइना को 63 में दे दिया. ये पोर्शन देने का कुछ रीजन होगा, कुछ मकसद होगा. इनफैक्ट इसके कुछ देयर मस्ट बी सम रीजंस बिहाइंड इट, and that's something I'll talk about as we go ahead. But remember this red patch. And finally in 62, this Aksai chain is something that we lost in the 62 war. So now what you see is this is what we are left with. We're left with 60% of this. Of this, we kind of have 60% left with us, which is this part. Now I want to just quickly talk about the Kargil war. The Kargil war was not fought here. It was actually fought here. And even when we did, even when our special forces went for surgical strikes, they didn't kind of go here, which would have been straight into Pakistan, but they actually went beyond the line of control, which is in POK, which is part of the Pakistan, or in fact this side. So what I'm just saying is, look at the strict, really, really strict guidelines under which our Indian Air Force and the Army defense services have to kind of operate. Such strict guidelines that the line of control is sacrosanct. And one of the things I want to share with all of you is, it's very important to know this, that the Indian Army is actually not an expansionist army. India has never had expansion-oriented army. So we've never built we're not an aggressive expansionist army. In fact, we are a defense-oriented army. There's a big difference between the two. And which explains why we fought the Kargil war also under very, very tough circumstances. In fact, the officer to Jawan ratio loss was the highest, which basically means in any war, our officers always lead from the front. And the officer to Jawan ratio casualty is the highest with the Indian Army. It's a true testament that that an officer will never tell the soldier to do something that he cannot do himself. And it came out in subsequent wars, especially in Kargil. So this is where Kargil is. And like I said, we lost Aksai chain in 62. 63, this land was given to Pakistan. This is Gilgit-Baltistan. So we'll just move a little more deeper into J&K. Let's just see the next map. This one, now there's a lot of names. Don't worry about and don't get kind of, oh boy, so many names, etc. Intention is not to kind of give so much detail ke itna aapko yaad rakhne ki zarurat nahi hai, but there are a few names I want to share with all of you because ye aap bahut sunne wale hain. Agle 2 mahine, 4 mahine, 6 mahine, 5 saal. ये सारे नाम बहुत आने वाले हैं because these are strategically important locations, and that is why I wanted to share with some of these slides I've very recently put together and I wanted to share with you. So I'm just going a little deeper into the Jammu and Kashmir state and its geography. First things first, Siachen kahan par hai? Now Siachen ye raha. This is the Siachen glacier which is now controlled by India. ये सियाचिन है. एंड आपको याद होगा कि मैंने आपको दिखाया था कि ये 63 में पाकिस्तान ने चाइना को दे दिया था, तो इसका नाम है शाक्सगाम वैली. अब शाक्सगाम वैली इज कंट्रोल्ड बाय चाइना. ये शाक्सगाम वैली इंपॉर्टेंट इसलिए क्योंकि इसमें 2-3 चीजें हैं. द हाईएस्ट फॉर देयर आर 250 के करीब ग्लेशियर हैं. वाटर रिसोर्सेज यहाँ पे बहुत अच्छे हैं. यहाँ से इनकी हाईवेज बहुत बन चुकी हैं. तो ये शाक्सगाम वैली के बारे में आज भी और आगे भी आप बहुत सुनेंगे. एक इंपॉर्टेंट चीज है जो आप लोग सुन रहे होंगे नॉडेज इज दौलत बे गोल्डी, डीबीओ कहते हैं इसको. ये बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग है. इसमें इंडिया ने एट द हाईएस्ट हाइट, एट द हाईएस्ट पॉसिबल हाइट्स, इंडिया इज मेड अ एयरफोर्स बेस. And our Globemaster C-130 C-7 Globemasters are now actually landing at Daulat Beg Oldie. ये हवाई अड्डा सबसे ऊंचा हवाई अड्डा है दुनिया में, और यहाँ पे इंडिया ने एक्चुअली एक रोड भी बना दिया है. मैं आपको ये सब इसलिए बता रहा हूँ बिकॉज आई विल कम बैक टू दिस इन सम टाइम, बिकॉज ये बहुत जरूरी है टू फिगर आउट कि ये हो क्या रहा है. So just very quickly, ये अक्साई चेन अगेन, ये है सियाचिन, शाक्सगाम वैली जो कि अब चाइना के पास है, और ये गिलगिट बाल्टिस्तान जो कि सपोजिटली पाकिस्तान के कंट्रोल में है। बट एक चीज याद रखिएगा, पिछले 6 साल में और इस गवर्नमेंट के मैनिफेस्टो में भी अगर आप पढ़ें, वन ऑफ द थिंग्स दैट दे हैव रिटन इज reclaiming POK as part of their election manifesto. So I will keep coming back to Gilgit-Baltistan because it has ramifications as we go ahead. So we'll stop this part for a minute. And by the way, अगर आप जानना चाहेंगे कि गलवान वैली यहाँ पर है, जिसके बारे में बहुत पेपर में आया, this is Galwan Valley and this is the Pangong Tso Lake. So once again, दौलत बेग ओल्डी, गलवान वैली, ये है कारगिल। हम आज की डेट में रफली 65% कंट्रोल करते हैं एक्चुअल जम्मू एंड कश्मीर का। और आपको हैरानी होगी कि अगर आप मैप पे वापस जाओ, सो श्रीनगर जो है बहुत ही छोटा पोर्शन है पूरे जम्मू कश्मीर का, और लद्दाख इज एक्चुअली मच मच बिगर कंपेयर्ड टू जम्मू और श्रीनगर। सो ये जो अभी धारा 370 का रिवर्सल हुआ है actually shows the 3 states in very, very right proportions, because Ladakh has become a union territory because of its sheer size. So now we will go to the next map, which is this conflict with China. And by the way, आज मैं चाइना के बारे में ज़्यादा बात कर रहा हूँ इसलिए not because ये topic ज़रूरी है, because ये हमेशा से ही सबसे बड़ा elephant was China. Pakistan was always a distraction. So today I'm just spending a little bit more time on the map for all of you to get a sense कि चाइना के साथ हमारे कॉन्फ्लिक्ट किस किस एरिया में है। सो 3 एरिया में हमारे कॉन्फ्लिक्ट हैं। एक तो मैंने जहां आपको डिटेल में आज थोड़ा सा जम्मू कश्मीर का मैप दिखाया, अक्साई चीन, जहां पे आज की डेट में एक्शन चल रहा है, इसे हम वेस्टर्न सेक्टर बुलाते हैं। फिर आइए थोड़ा नीचे, ये आप छोटा सा रेड स्पॉट देख रहे हैं, ये है छोटा, 550 किलोमीटर का है, ये है उत्तराखंड। उत्तराखंड में भी हमारा बॉर्डर मीट करता है चाइना के साथ, और यहाँ पे भी इश्यूज हैं मगर कंट्रोल्ड हैं, कम इश्यूज हैं। मगर सबसे बड़ा पंगा अपना है ईस्टर्न सेक्टर में, जो कि अरुणाचल प्रदेश। अरुणाचल एक्चुअली इज डिस्प्यूटेड एरिया, एंड अकॉर्डिंग टू द चाइनीज, अरुणाचल प्रदेश इज चाइनीज. We have Arunachal Pradesh, of course, is part of India, but I'm just saying that that's an area that is claimed by China. डोकलाम का जितना भी एक्शन हुआ था वो इस साइड हुआ था, एंड इट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट कि हम लोग ये समझें कि चाइना के साथ हमारा बॉर्डर इतना लंबा है, बट ईस्टर्न सेक्टर, सेंट्रल सेक्टर, वेस्टर्न सेक्टर, तीनों जगह कॉन्फ्लिक्टेड एरियाज हैं। आज की डेट में अपना वेस्टर्न सेक्टर पे जो भी गलवान वैली वगैरह, वेस्टर्न सेक्टर में ज्यादा एक्शन है। लेट्स गो टू द नेक्स्ट मैप। जैसे मैंने आपको इंडिया का मैप दिखाया, पाकिस्तान का मैप दिखाया। पाकिस्तान में मैंने आपको दिखाया कि बलूचिस्तान, सिंध दोनों काफी बड़े एरिया हैं, और 45% है वर्चुअली ऑफ पाकिस्तान डिस्प्यूटेड एरिया है। ये है चाइना का मैप। दिस इज द थर्ड मैप दैट आई वांटेड टू शो यू ऑफ अ कंट्री। अगेन मैसिव कंट्री, आई डोंट नीड टू टॉक टू यू अबाउट इट। आजकल इसके फंड की परफॉर्मेंस भी अच्छी चल रही है, बट टुडे आई काइंड ऑफ फोकस only on the map out here. And you know, it's very interesting that when you look at China, while it looks like a unified country, but it's a culmination of 3 different countries that it has annexed. So let me tell you, start with Tibet. It actually annexed Tibet, and Tibet became part of China. Supposedly it's now part of China, and so one part of Tibet is Chinese. One part of Mongolia has been taken up by China, and then this is what they call China proper, which is this demarcated line is what is China proper, so to speak. And you'll notice that all along this Yellow Sea, East China Sea, South China Sea, that's where all of China's cities actually exist. So whether that's Guangzhou or Shanghai, or we see Hong Kong. Well, Hong Kong is, for the purposes of this discussion, I'm just saying that most of Chinese cities actually exist along the sea, and that's obvious because most trade, most civilization actually would have settled down near the sea. Also, please remember that the second largest desert in the world is Gobi Desert. which is in China. And right here are the mountains, the Himalayas, which makes it very inhospitable. So this is the map of China. Now, I want to spend some time here and share with you the fact that the word South China Sea, East China Sea, and all of this, I'm sure you all have been hearing a lot, because the conflict that China has gotten into with at least 16 to 17 different countries. Now, right here on the map, they are in direct conflict with South Korea, with Japan, with Taiwan. They take Taiwan as part of their own structure. They're obviously having issues in Hong Kong, with Philippines, with Vietnam, with Indonesia. So this entire area actually is conflicted. And my next slide, what I want to show you is the reason why all of this is starting to happen. So just very quickly, just to quickly summarize till now, we looked at some of the maps, and what we realized is the size of Pakistan, we saw the size of India, we saw Jammu and Kashmir, we saw how China borders India right here, and we have a pretty long border, no doubt about it. And we have 3 areas of conflict with them, and that's the size of China. And China in itself is kind of, taking on 17, 18 different countries simultaneously. So why? Why is that happening? And why don't we spend some time on that today? And kind of, I'll take you through, as we spend more time on the maps, I'll just spend some time kind of explaining the why. But you can see out here that things with at least 16 countries is a bit of a pain point right now. So let's just spend a bit more time. I found this very interesting map on Google. One day I was just surfing the net, and all of these photos are publicly available. I have not kind of created them on my own. All of this is in public domain. One day I was just clicking, going through the net, and I found this amazing story, amazing map, India inverted. And then I realized that look at the vastness of the ocean. Look at the vastness of the sea, the vastness of the water, the vastness of what we have to cover here versus what we have to cover here. Big difference. You can add the 2 fronts, it still adds to half of what we have to cover in the oceans. And that got me thinking, obviously that makes sense, because close to 55, 60% of Earth is water. So obviously that made sense. But intuitively, whenever you think of it, what we tend to think is that, wow, we have a massive border with China, and then we have a massive border with Pakistan. True. But what is also true is that we have this massive water ocean mass to cover as well. And this is where things start to look a little different. So by the way, so I'm just going to leave this here for 10 more seconds for everyone to register. Remember that any country that became a superpower actually controlled the seas. Look at the British. The sun never set on the British Empire. Look at the Japanese. Look at the Americans. Today, the Americans control the world militarily simply because of their naval presence. And for this, you can see that. So why are the Chinese actually taking on so many countries simultaneously? It's for the control of the oceans, control of the seas. And let me explain that further. This is a program that they started about 20 years ago. They never called it something, but in the research papers, it's very nicely titled as String of Pearls. Over the last 20 years, the Chinese have been putting in, wherever you see a star and a red, it's a Chinese military base or it's a Chinese merchant base. So over the last 18 years, the Chinese have been putting military bases right through the South China Sea, the Yellow China Sea, East China Sea, the Yellow Sea, East China Sea, South China Sea. You can see that in this entire area, it's just full of stars and red. For the last 17 years, they've been doing that. And a lot of that is where they've actually built on islands. They've actually created islands and have built airports, they've built military bases, they've built naval bases. You can see that this area is ringed. But as you start coming to Indian Ocean region, that red star tends to thin out. There has been a presence in Sri Lanka that the Chinese have had. It started to reverse. There has been a presence in Bangladesh, but that is also starting to reverse. But what I want you all of you to remember is this is in a way dominated. But once you start coming into the Indian Ocean region, which is massively vast, it's the Indian naval presence out here, as well as Port Blair, Car Nicobar, Andaman, where the Indian flag starts to fly very, very high. And controlling the ocean this way is our area. And I think this is a significant point. I just, आप सबको ये बहुत जान के थोड़ी हैरानी भी होगी that actually अपना naval presence on the seas is in this area really, really strong and good enough for coverage. And when I say coverage, we'll probably talk about it as we spend more time. But this, I want you to just remember that the naval presence out here is supremely strong, and you can see that. You can see that with the Indian map. But as the Chinese start coming here, it thins out. Now I want you to focus on a couple of places. One is star number 12. What is 12? 12 is Gwadar Port. Again, Gwadar Port is now in the news. Gwadar Port is in Balochistan, and Balochistan is in Pakistan. And we'll connect the dots as we go and spend time. But what you'll also see that the Chinese have actually built quite a lot of infrastructure in Djibouti, in Africa, Horn of Africa. So you can see that they've been at it. काम कर रहे हैं ये लोग और धीरे-धीरे अपना presence बना रहे हैं. But the good news, the really, really rock solid news is that the Indian presence on the ocean is equally good. I also want to quickly, maybe this will come up as we do Q&A, but the armed forces presence, like to like, on and the Air Force has actually been one of the best of late. And we'll talk about it in the Q&A section if that question comes up. But for right now, this is how the string of pearls has been put together. Why would China be doing all this? Itna infrastructure, 20 साल से लगे हुए हैं. मतलब कोई कुछ तो reason होगा. So why don't we spend a little bit more time? And remember, all of this is not about land. It's not about mass. It's not about, oh, मेरे को ये कब्जा करना है. Sometimes, most of the times, it's economics. Most of the times, it's control. And so let's just spend some more time as to ये Chinese ये सब structure बना क्यों रहे हैं. What is it that they really want to do? Why are they in Gwadar? And what are they doing? Why did they take that land in 63? You remember the 63 land? Why did they do this? Why did they take this in 63? What's the end result? So let me just spend a bit more time and explain it a bit more. One of the things that a lot of you may have heard of late is the One Belt, One Road, or the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. It's actually, that construction is almost done. It's done actually from Beijing right into Europe, in Turkey. So on the highways, on road and in highway terms, the One Belt, One Road, the old Silk Route is already activated. And this goes right over our heads and into Turkey. And this is the maritime road that the Chinese, that any country would use. This is a snapshot, but let's just spend more time onto the next few slides to give an idea as to what are the Chinese up to. Now, I don't know if there's anyone from the Merchant Navy on this call or anyone from the Indian Navy. So if at all there is someone and I say something wrong, please pardon me, but I'm going to attempt to become the captain of a oil tanker, which starts from Shanghai, a port in China, and wants to collect oil from the Middle East, let's say out here. What route will they take? So I'm just kind of drawing this. Again, this is all in the public domain. I have not put this up. This is not my imagination. It's all in the public domain. If I was an oil tanker wanting to take oil and from China going all the way to the Middle East, what's the path I will take? And these paths are important for us to just get us hang on, just ये route क्या है, ये Google map क्या है इसका. So ये Google map है और ये Google map ऐसा है कि ये निकलेगा साउथ चाइना सी, जिसके बारे में हम बात कर चुके हैं, वियतनाम से निकलेगा, मलेशिया की तरफ आएगा, इंडोनेशिया क्रॉस करेगा और यहाँ पे आप ये देख रहे हैं एरिया, इसको बुलाते हैं मलाका स्ट्रेट्स. नाउ मलाका स्ट्रेट्स इज द जिसे कहते हैं द बॉन्ड ऑफ ट्रैफिक जैम्स. अब नेवल ट्रैफिक जैम जितने भी होते हैं ना, मलाका स्ट्रेट्स से ज्यादा कहीं नहीं होते हैं दुनिया में. आप देख भी सकते हैं उसका रीजन, क्योंकि बहुत ही कम एरिया है यहाँ से, एंड मैसिव अमाउंट ऑफ टैंकर्स क्रॉस this area. So whether it's oil tankers, whether it is merchant ships, whether it is naval exercises, यहाँ पे आके ट्रैफिक बहुत स्लो हो जाता है. दिस इज टिपिकली इन दिल्ली टर्म्स तो मैं बोलूँ तो ये गुड़गांव का टोल है, या फिर बॉम्बे टर्म में बोलूँ तो बॉम्बे में तो खैर बहुत ऑप्शन है ट्रैफिक जैम के, बट फिर भी अगर एक अच्छा वाला निकालूं तो मे बी गुड़गांव में गोरेगांव में जाके अटकेगा ये. सो दिस इज द इक्विवेलेंट ऑफ अ मैसिव ट्रैफिक जैम व्हेन इट कम्स टू ऑयल टैंकर्स, और फॉर दैट मैटर नेवल पैसेंजर freight containers. As the tanker moves ahead, you'll notice that boss अपने oil लेने के लिए that tanker has to pass through the Indian Ocean region. And remember मैंने आपको बोला था कि इंडियन ओशन रीजन में अपना नेवल प्रेजेंस काफी स्ट्रांग है. सो पहले तो वो टैंकर थोड़ा अटकेगा मलाका स्ट्रेट में, यहां से निकलेगा तो अटकेगा इंडियन ओशन रीजन में, फिर निकलेगा अरेबियन सी होते हुए, विल गो इनटू द मिडिल ईस्ट, तेल भरेगा. And in very simplistic terms and in a very basic manner, I'm explaining this, so please bear with me. I just want to make it as simple as possible. It takes the oil and makes the return route. Now, I want you to visualize this and in your mind, think two things. How much time would this take going, coming, or let's say one trip going, and what is the distance? Think about this whole, ये कितना होगा ये? If you had to take a guess, ये ट्रिप कितने किलोमीटर का होगा और ये कितना दिन लगाएगा? Actually, this trip is 13,000 kilometers. This long stretch is 13,000 किलोमीटर. जो मैंने आपको 2 मिनट में समझाया है, ये 13,000 किलोमीटर की जर्नी है. 45 दिन लगते हैं एक ट्रिप मारने में. सो अगर प्लीज रिमेंबर, इस दुनिया में राइट नाउ ऑयल का सबसे बड़ा जो कंज्यूमर है वो है चाइना. ऑयल फॉर दैट मैटर इज नंबर 1, और जितने भी बाकी मिनरल्स हैं वो तो है ही हैं, बट ऑयल का नंबर 1 कंज्यूमर है, बिकॉज एक पावरफुल नेशन की जो इंडस्ट्री है वो ज्यादातर ऑयल पे चलती है. सो पेट्रोलियम एंड ऑयल. It takes 13,000 kilometers, 45 days to make this trip. But what happens if you smartly don't do this? Get the oil to a port which is with a friendly nation, let's say Pakistan. Get the oil to a port, and let's call the port Gwadar port, and then operate it over land through the green route, and let's call this road the China-Pakistan economic corridor, and transport this entire thing not by sea or ocean, but by land. I now want you to think कि वो 13,000 किलोमीटर और 45 दिन कितना हो जाएगा. कि अगर ये आपको ये सब ना करना हो और सिर्फ लाना हो फ्रॉम लेट्स से फ्रॉम द मिडिल ईस्ट, सीधा अप्लाई ग्वादर पे, ग्वादर से हाईवे चाइना पाकिस्तान इकोनॉमिक कॉरिडोर, और इकोनॉमिक कॉरिडोर स्टार्ट होता है ग्वादर में, बलूचिस्तान में. बलूचिस्तान है डिस्प्यूटेड. एंड कहाँ होता है? ओ अच्छा, एंड गिलगिट बाल्टिस्तान में होता है डिस्प्यूटेड. पाकिस्तान ऑक्यूपाइड कश्मीर की डिस्प्यूटेड. और एंड और अच्छा कहाँ होता है वो याद है आपको? 63 वाला एरिया, शाक्सगाम वैली, जो कि पाकिस्तान ने पकड़ा दिया था चाइना को. अच्छा, एंड वो होता है वहां पे चाइना पाकिस्तान इकोनॉमिक कॉरिडोर. नाउ जस्ट सी हाउ दिस इज ऑल प्लेइंग थ्रू. इफ दिस वाज नॉट टू बी डन, एंड if the route was the green route, 13,000 kilometers actually shrinks to 2,000 kilometers. And now I want you to just wear the hat of a logistics manager and try and get a sense of what happens if this whole journey crunches from 13 to 2,000. What it really means is that this entire journey gets done in 10 days. From 45 days. So 2 things are happening simultaneously. The journey gets cut by 13,000 kilometers to 2,000 kilometers, from 45 days down to 10 days. And by the way, none of this that I'm showing you is in the realm of imagination. This infrastructure is already up and running. It's actually CPEC is China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. The entire construction is happening at furious pace. It's almost ready. Gwadar Port is ready. And a lot of this infrastructure is already up and running. And remember that all of this is also happening because in case of a conflict with India, China would find itself in a very, very precarious situation in moving oil, because remember, we control this and blockade is quite possible. So to remove this blockade, they've created this entire infrastructure, which in itself has actually reduced 13,000 kilometers to 2,000 and 45 days to down to 10 days. What it actually means is that this entire story, while at Gwadar and at Gilgit, all three are disputed areas. What I'm actually trying to explain and get at is none of this is about acquiring a country as much as it is about economics. And let me explain what I meant by that is in this slide. If you look at the background of China and India conflicts, it's actually on the basis of investments that the Chinese have made such that they can get access for right from the 1950s. This has been very well thought through by them. They've created this such that they can get infrastructure. And I must say this, I've said this on many occasions, but now I can say this with ease. Pakistan is no longer a country. It's actually the 24th province of China. It's become a vassal state of China. You'd be very surprised to know this. 40% of the Pakistani stock exchange is actually owned by China. Most people can't understand what that means. What I'm saying is that China owns Pakistan. And it's very important to recognize this between all of us. Actually, India doesn't deal with Pakistan. We deal with China, and we've constantly dealt with China. It's always been the front. It's actually been on the back, and the front has been Pakistan. But for a country our size, it's this elephant that we have to talk about. And remember that this CPEC is a $50 billion investment. It has a $500 billion return, because if you stop that, if you kind of get a better logistical way to move your transport, you actually get a $500 billion return. Now, my question to all of you is, at what cost will you protect your investment? At what cost will you protect your $50 billion investment, which will anticipated to give a $500 billion return? And the answer I get when I would do these seminars is that at any cost. So, and which is the proverbial Kashmir problem. It's not religious, it's not political. Actually, it is the cost that we've had to pay so that we are always, India has been kept wondering and kept bothered with Kashmir so that this kind of infrastructure builds out and helps the Chinese. So what I wanted to, at least in the first portion of my talk, leave you with is that this construction has primarily been to keep, and Kashmir has been kept on boil such that we never ask the question, ki ye Gilgit apna hai, Baltistan apna hai. For the first time in the last 6 years, the Prime Minister of this country has stood on the ramparts of Red Fort and said, Gilgit Baltistan hamara hai, Baluchistan hamare bhai hain. Now, when you start making, and by the way, in Lok Sabha, the Home Minister went and said, "Hum POK or Aksai chain वापस लेंगे," and not in Lok Sabha, in the Parliament. Now, when you make those noises and then you do 370, you are definitely going to upset countries, and this is simply because it is about economics. And now, what I want to do is spend very quickly a little bit of time on this is the background. But I want to share with you what is happening today. What has suddenly happened in the last 6 months, perhaps whereabouts 6 months, and what, in my opinion, I've done some work on this, just read a bit about this. What is it that's happening today? Like this is, what's the problem that we're facing with the Chinese as we speak? What's the Galwan issue all about? So while Gilgit-Baltistan CPEC is very, very critical because they want to keep India occupied in Kashmir, But why the issue in Galwan? Why are they kind of encroaching again? It's very interesting as to what is happening there. Now, I'll try and finish the next section in the next 6 or 7 minutes. So kindly bear with me. This is something I've recently put together after reading a little bit about it. Some of it might sound like a James Bond movie, but bear with me and I'll try and connect the dots, but it's something that I think all of us must be aware of. So here goes. What is the current situation, the current conflict? And I think the current conflict is not about land. It's not about taking Galwan Valley. It's not about taking the next peak. It's not about taking the next valley. It's actually water. And now I'm not talking about ocean. Here I'm talking about water, rivers. And there's a reason for it. I'll try and connect the dots. And like I said, some of it might sound very surreal to you, but bear with me. The current conflict is not for land. Land is where it is fought, but the reason for it is water. And why do I say that? The reason why I say that is, let me take you back a couple of years or 2-3 years ago. This is a destroyer. It's called the USS Zumwalt. It's an American destroyer, very high tech. And in November 2016, it was passing through the Panama Canal and it broke down. Now, please understand, I'm using basic simplistic language such that I can explain this, but it literally broke down and its propulsion system went haywire. This happened sometime in 2016. Simultaneously, this is a very high-tech, very expensive, state-of-the-art USS destroyer, and they obviously took a lot of pride, but the propulsion system failed. Okay. Next, what happens is that there's a British destroyer, HMS Duncan, suffers propulsion failure. Again, it just crashes. Like when I say crash, please understand it, that the propulsion system failure basically means it's stuck middle of nowhere. One is stuck in Panama, one is stuck next to the port. Now both these happened on separate occasions, separately, but both had one common audit. When audit happened, again, audit is a word which everyone can relate to. When the defense departments of both the countries tried to figure out कि ये पंगा क्या है, they figured out that both of them had microchips that were installed from a company called Huawei, and both of them had been actually, those chips by way of electromagnetic pulse had been destroyed. So when you use electromagnetic pulse, the chips go haywire and that entire circuitry breaks down. And in a way, without even firing a bullet, all you have to do is find a backdoor to the chip and put a pulse on the chip breaks down, and everything around it, the circuitry breaks down, and you have a failure. Now, these two happened on ships, on destroyers. When I started reading a little bit more about it, and I heard of this from two very eminent speakers, great speakers they've written a book on this. When I started reading about this, then I suddenly realized that there was a Sukhoi 30 flying over Tezpur, and out of nowhere, it just crashed. And when you start piecing it all together, what you realize is that an electromagnetic pulse with a backdoor microchip fitted in can be very, very destructive, which is what the Americans found out. And please remember, there is a kind of a correlation directly back to Galwan Valley and the deaths of our 20 soldiers. So for that, you'll have to just kind of listen to the whole story. So this happened with Zumwalt, this happened with Duncan. And when the Americans and the British found out what's going on, they realized that the Chinese have hacked into US defense and US companies. There's a ton of information out there on this. You can see that I picked up articles. Bloomberg had this fantastic article. In fact, there's a movie that has just got released today called The Big Hack, the Large Hack or The Big Hack. It's on this particular aspect. Bloomberg wrote articles on it. It's been covered extensively that the Chinese have used tiny chips to infiltrate US companies, for example, Amazon and Apple, and they did their own due diligence. And they've also kind of somehow managed to get into the defense equipment that is used by the Americans. Once all of this came through, once all of this was figured out, the Trump administration actually banned Huawei and ZTE. They just banned them and said that you cannot have any access to countries. And the ban actually got extended to any company which was providing microchips or semiconductors to Huawei. Now, please understand, now this is a massive development that has happened. Why I say that is uh, the Americans banned Huawei, and in turn, they banned any country or company to supply chips to Huawei. You can see that in these articles. TSMC, which is the largest creator of chips in the world, foundry in Taiwan, has to halt chip supply to Huawei in 2 months. The US wanted to starve Huawei of chips. It's working. Semiconductors are a weapon. Now, please see what is happening. And all of this has happened literally in the last 18 months. The Huawei ban came, and in many ways, every important supplier was asked not to supply raw material to Huawei for the creation of electronic products. Now, what are semiconductors and chips used for apart from defense? Now, for a minute, let's keep defense aside. They're used here. They're used on the phone. They're used on everything around us. There's a semiconductor, and Huawei actually got banned. And in partial ban and full ban, you can see that all of them, the Americans, the Canadians, Australians, the Japanese, in fact, now India, the British, all of these countries have actually banned Huawei. And let's see the impact of what is the connection with Galwan. I'm going to come to that. Huawei got banned, but what has happened is when Huawei got banned, they didn't have any access left to chips as well. So ZTE and Huawei, and just look at the data out here. Data suggests that the Chinese are the largest importers of semiconductor products in the world. 60%, actually 60% of semiconductors are imported by Chinese. And it's almost today, as we speak, this is a 2017 number, it's almost a $300 billion import of semiconductor chips for the use of phones, TVs, you name it, items that are used by doctors. I mean, a semiconductor is used everywhere. And you can see that 3 countries, the Japanese, the Taiwanese, and the Americans, have refused to supply semiconductors. Now that is serious stuff, simply because it's an existential crisis for the Chinese. And I'm not exaggerating here. There is an existential crisis for the simple reason that this entire next generation of Xi Jinping's agenda was to dominate technology. And in that domination, by the year 2030, they wanted to dominate the semiconductor world. But with this ban, what has happened is that all their current projects worth $1.5 trillion 5G rollout in literally 90 countries is now under threat for 2 reasons. One, the ban on Huawei, and second, access to semiconductors. And the problem is that China actually needs unrestricted access to fresh waters to make microchips. Now, let me get this straight. It's not as if the Chinese don't make microchips, they do. But to replace this, they need unrestricted access to fresh water, because the smallest chip, the nano centimeter chip, requires 10,000 gallons of fresh water to clean it. That's how much a nano chip requires just for clean. And it's fresh water, which is then, the definition of fresh water is it cannot be drunk. There's a lot of process that goes into it to make it super clean so that the chips are cleaned. Now, I'm not going to go into the details, but here is the threat. With the entire ban, the Chinese are actually at an existential crisis, because Taiwan has stopped supplying, Japanese have stopped supplying, or at least that's where it's headed. The Americans are up in arms, and you can see that now suddenly the Indians are saying no more Huawei, no more 5G from China. And the CPC, the Chinese Parliamentary Commission, is actually now sitting on a $1.5 trillion 5G rollout, which is getting stuck. So what do? If they don't replace the chips, they are in trouble. And to get the chips, you need you need tons of fresh water. Where do they get the water from? And comes back that the water, unrestricted, super clean, fresh water. And remember, the Yangtze and all of the rivers in China are now polluted. Where do they get the waters from? They do get the waters from Indus. And where does the Indus flow from? Gilgit. Where does Chenab, Jhelum, Ravi, Satluj, where do they all flow from? This is the Indus. It actually flows from right from the start of the Shaksgam Valley, which is what is occupied by them. And once again, we come back to that small little land 63, which the Pakistanis gave, the flow of Indus into Pakistan, the flow of the tributaries, the three tributaries are Shyok River, Galwan River, which actually are tributaries to Indus. And that's where they want unrestricted, uncontested access, such that they can, for the next 5 years, stop the dependence on the world for microchips and have access to fresh waters. And suddenly there is construction that has started happening in Kashgar. And like I said, I won't go into the details. But what has happened? Why this Panga today in Galwan? What has happened is that I will quickly go back to one map, which is important, is this map. India has started building this airport. I told you it's the highest airport, Daulat Beg Oldi, and they built a road out here. And all this airport is now fully accessible. It's a strategic road. And the Chinese, if they allow this road to come up, India has full access to Shaksgam Valley through Siachen. It controls, India will then have control and can actually make a dent into the Chinese domination of waters. So to stop the road construction, to stop the access that India wanted on the waters, is when the Galwan Valley, actually that's when the encroachment started, such that they could control this area and get access to Indus. Now, I want to end this section by telling you all that India in the last 6 years has constructed 65 strategic roads. And strategic roads are not normal roads. They're only meant for purposes of defense. They're not normal roads. They're meant for speedy transportation of defense equipment, tanks, heavy equipment. 65 such roads have been completed. One of those roads was the road leading to Daulat Beg Oldi Airport. And that would have given India unrestricted access to areas which are controlled by the Chinese. And that is what has led to the current fight, where the Chinese have pushed India back, or at least wanting to push back. And the result is that the fight back that India did, that the Indian soldiers did, was most unexpected by the Chinese. The death of those 20 soldiers resulted in a massive kind of a hit to the Chinese. They never expected that. And there's one last part I want to share with all of you on this call. I know we're running out of time, that a country like India, whether it was Kargil or for that matter 2020, 20 soldiers died, has always honored its soldiers. We never ever for a minute said that this soldier's death is not counted for. And both in Kargil, we saw in Pakistan, and now in China, they have refused to accept the death or the casualty. So you're dealing with an enemy, or you're dealing with a country which refuses to even accept the death of its fallen soldier. And that's the extent that you have to factor in these issues. Now, I want to end this section and kind of just give you that the new wars are not bullets. We saw a very, very savage war on the night where 20 soldiers lost their lives, but they gave the most befitting reply ever. Almost 60 to 65 Chinese lost their lives in very, very serious conditions. But the new war is actually not kinetic, and it's already being fought. Cyber war, you can read what happened to Australia. Some of the biggest networks were kind of crippled. The banking network was crippled. Some of their thermal plants were crippled. So the new wars are cyber. Electromagnetic pulse is real. There's not James Bond stuff. It happened with USS Zumwalt. In fact, most defense equipment aircrafts have now what is known as electronic measures, and then counter electronic measures to take care of things like the electromagnetic pulse. It's about water. And there's tons of construction of dams going on by the Pakistanis and the Chinese and by the Indians for access to fresh water. It's economics and not necessarily as much politics, it's trade wars. And what I want to leave all of you with is microchips and access to manufacturing to microchips is the new oil. Well, of course, everyone says data is the new oil, but that's an economic format. But all the issues that we've seen in the world, whether it was wars or Middle East or whatever, was access to oil. So we have that that does still exist, but the access to microchips and the access to facilities and the access to fresh waters is the new development in the world. And again, India will be at the forefront of that new world. So I'm going to stop here for a while. I can actually spend 5 more minutes on a topic which is tremendously important, but I don't know how we're doing on time. I can see that we've done about an hour. Yeah, okay. So the last section of what I want to share with all of you is all of this, in my opinion, in the last 6 or 7 years, the Indian response has been coming off on various parameters, whether it's the construction of roads, whether it is Balakot strikes, whether it is surgical strikes, whether it is a response in Myanmar. People may have actually forgotten that the first surgical strike that this government did was in Myanmar. So what I'm saying is there are different formats in which you start responding, and it's heartening to see that this government is putting a lot of trust and impetus on the response by the defense services. They're saying that this is your job and we trust you. And I think that's a big shift that we're starting to notice in the current disposition. So I'm going to kind of just shift to something which is very, very critical. And I will try and spend 10 minutes on that topic. It's important because it has a direct impact on our country. It has it has a huge impact on our country. And I'll just spend 5 or 10 minutes on that, which is one of our largest security concerns is actually terrorism. You'd be surprised to know that we are the largest importers of terrorism in the world. When no one knew 9/11, we had our own Kanishka being bombed out. Not sure how many of you remember, but Kanishka was an aircraft took off from a Canadian airport and just bombed out. It was part of Khalistan movement, etc. Now, we've been victims of terrorism for as long as I can remember. I think it's been part and parcel of our structure for as long as you can remember. And it's quite fascinating when I ask this question to people, are you victims of terror or not? And most times I get the answer no. And I wonder what do they mean by no? Because obviously it's no, because they didn't take a bullet on their shoulder, on their chest. They didn't probably lose a relative somewhere. But I'm going to ask you this question again, that are you a victim of terrorism? And let me explain this why I ask you in many ways. So are you a victim of terror? Let me ask that question and share some numbers and statistics with you. Moody's did a research on the impact of terrorism on the Indian economy. And they took a 20-year period and they did this study way back. They did this in 2013. So I'm just saying, imagine the impact when they did this in 2013. They took 20 years and they wanted to do an economic impact. Kitna hota hai. So उन्होंने चलो स्टडी करी, मूडी का स्टडी है तो अच्छा ही होगा. So 20 साल का स्टडी किया. पहले तो आप ये गेस करिए, in that period 94 to 2013 they looked at the number of attacks on this country. अपने देश में कितने अटैक हुए होंगे ये 20 साल में, और उन्होंने देखा कि उस 20 साल में 6024 अटैक हुए हैं. Now I want that to sink in for all of you, क्योंकि आपके देश में, हमारे और आपके देश में, और आज इंडिपेंडेंस डे, स्वतंत्रता दिवस है, हम बहुत मना रहे हैं उसको, बट पिछले 20 सालों में 2013 तक, और ये अच्छा है ये डेटा, 94 से 2013, and remember 94 still doesn't take into account the Punjab terrorism problem, तो उसको ऐड करेंगे तो अनगिनत. बट फॉर नाउ 20 साल का मतलब 6,000 attack, and these are terror attacks, not Naxal attack, or these are small, big, large, but terror attacks. Now, 6,000 अटैक का मतलब अगर आप सिंपल टर्म में देखो तो 20 साल का मतलब हर दिन एक अटैक. इसको पहले तो आप इंटरनलाइज करिए कि हर दिन एक अटैक हो रहा है आपके देश पे. Now, by the way, Moody's did the research and they figured out that any large attack takes away 1.5% GDP in that 1 year. Large attack. And 2% investment growth in that 1 year. So I'll repeat that. Moody said 1.5% in GDP उड़ जाता है, 2% investment grade उड़ जाता है उस साल में जब large attack हो. अब definition of large attack उन्होंने समझा दिया था. मान लीजिए 26/11 is a large attack. ऐसे, बट ये भी याद रखिएगा कि हमारे और आपके देश में 6,000 अटैक का मतलब 1 per day. नाउ आई एम सेइंग दैट चलो 1 per day हो गया है, तो यानी कि हर साल एक बड़ा अटैक तो हुआ ही होगा अपने देश में. और अगर आपको थोड़ा हिस्ट्री देखना है तो कनिष्का, 93 में मुंबई, कांधार का हाईजैकिंग, ये इन माय ओपिनियन वाज द वर्स्ट अटैक ऑन आवर कंट्री. ट्रेन ब्लास्ट, 26/11, पठानकोट, कोई लिस्ट में कोई कमी नहीं है. और बाय द वे ऐसी कोई ऐसा शहर नहीं है जहां पे अटैक ना हुआ हो. सो हर साल अगर आप एक लार्ज अटैक देखो तो यानी कि उस साल 1.5% का जीडीपी उड़ गया, 2% का इन्वेस्टमेंट उड़ गया. पर अब इसको आप कंपाउंड करो बाय 20 years. मोस्ट पीपल ऑन दिस कॉल आर फ्रॉम द म्यूचुअल फंड इंडस्ट्री, दे आर फाइनेंशियल एडवाइजर्स. You can now wear your compounding hat and see what a 1.5% loss per year means in economic terms to the growth of a country. And to my mind, that has been the classic problem, the biggest issue that we face as a nation. And this has been the cost that we've had to bear for terrorism. And I'll give you very simple examples. A terror attack actually inflates costs dramatically. When you go to an airport, you have to get frisked. You have to go 2 hours ahead of time. It adds up to the cost. Tourism comes down. You have to hire CISF security at various points. You have to stop new attacks. In fact, one of my friends did a study and he realized that you have to spend 22% more money just to stop new attacks. Now, the economic cost is so large that it's just a perfect business model. And please understand what I'm saying. You send 3 people, you send 4 people, they create havoc in a city, and the country gets hampered for the next 12 months. What a perfect business model. You don't have to go to war. You've actually created a country which is forever trying to just come back on its feet. Now, if this started to untangle, if this was stopped, if this was said to be country's number one issue, and the political disposition said ab bus, and you start to undo this mess, that's when you start becoming a secure nation. And this, to my mind, is starting to happen because actionable intelligence, a lot of stuff is starting to happen in this country. Last 6 years, barring Pathankot, we've had no major large attack in this country. And it actually starting to come together. One last slide. This is my last slide. So I have a slide, I have a question and an observation to share with you, after which I will stop. My observation is that if a country has faced 6,000 attacks in 20 years, it cannot have been done without internal support for it. I'll give you what I mean by that. अगर मेरे घर में और आपके घर में या किसी ऑफिस में चोरी होती है, एक बारी तो कोई बल्ब ले जाता है, कोई साइकिल ले जाता है, कोई कुछ ले जाता है, कंप्यूटर ले जाता है, तो 2 बारी, 4 बारी, 6 बारी, 7वीं बारी तो आप कैमरा लगाओगे या एक गार्ड को बिठाओगे या थोड़ी सिक्योरिटी. 8-10 बारी, 12, 15वां बारी तो फिर पुलिस भी आके बोलेगी कि बॉस शायद आप ही बुला रहे हो अंदर. Now, how can a country accept 6,000 odd attacks and be perpetually being hit by terrorism if it didn't have tacit internal approval? So it's a sensitive point that I'm making, but it's an important point. It probably had tacit internal approvals, which is why we were constantly attacked. And I think that is starting to reverse because for this particular government, the number one agenda is national security and counterterrorism. It's priority number 1. My question to all of you is, I am now a manufacturing unit. I'm the owner of a company and I want to put a 500 crore ka plant, my options are come to Gurgaon or go to Jharkhand. Gurgaon gives me no tax breaks but gives me security. Jharkhand gives me 5-year tax break but gives me kind of, it's probably Naxal infested, thoda panga ho sakta hai, though zaruri nahi hai. Where will you ask me to put my plant? Chances are that you being sane will tell me, okay, don't take panga, go to Gurgaon, put a plant and get on with life. 5-year tax break na bhi ho, koi baat nahi. Security is zyada important. ये डिस्कशन अगर हार्ले डेविडसन का सीईओ कर रहा हो न्यूयॉर्क के एक बोर्ड रूम में, कहाँ जाएं, गांगजाओ जाएं या न्यू दिल्ली जाएं? ऑब्वियसली वो गांगजाओ जाएगा, बिकॉज गांगजाओ में कुछ पंगा नहीं है. न्यू दिल्ली में देश में पूरा नाम आ जाता है. नंबर वन इशू इज रिस्क. नाउ if you look at it from that angle, you'll realize foreign direct investors or investments need confidence, they need security, they need low risk. And I think this government has tried its best, or at least trying its best, to put that whole structure in place to start reducing the cost of terrorism. And now what I wanted to do is end this entire discussion by saying, in my opinion, I think the costs of terrorism are starting to come down. Look at it now forward 10 years. If this 1.5% reverses, we don't have that cost. If we have, let's say, if Uttar Pradesh starts to add, let's say, a Bimaru state adds 0.5 to GDP, and let's say GST is clean and we add another 0.5, you actually are starting to add back 2% to GDP by just controlling some of these costs. And over 10 and 20 years, that can have a massive impact on our nation. So I want to just sum it all up by saying that the elephant in the room is China. Pakistan's too inconsequential. It's not even a country. It's just a state of China now. In the last few years, I think the way the Indian defense services, the Air Force, the Navy, and the armed services have actually countered China is par excellence. There are economic reasons why the Chinese are trying to make inroads. They've been doing that from the 1950s. It was for the China-Pakistan economic corridor to begin with. Today, it is for access to fresh waters, and this is not stopping. Bullets are not the new wars. The new wars is cyber war, electromagnetic pulse, trade wars, and water wars. And I just think that India, in my mind, is just at the right point with the right frame of mind to take on the Chinese. If at all there's any country right now which can do that, it's us, and we're also forming the right associations for the future. So I'm going to stop here now. I've taken a lot of time. It's over 1 hour, 15 minutes. I'm going to stop here and take a breather and just kind of stop share as well. And in case there are any questions I can help with or anything that's popped up, anything that's there in your mind, I'm happy to answer. But thanks for hearing me out.
Yeah, thank you so much, Karan. Absolutely brilliantly put facts which were probably not so known, and the interpretation of the action that has been taken by the government and across the continent. Extremely well put. One question after seeing the presentation which pops up, and this is in reference to the point that you made that it's a war of water, basically. It's a water war.
Oh, today, yeah.
Yeah. So if you look at the coastline of India, that's around 7,500 kilometers, whereas the land frontier is double, which is 15,000 kilometers. But the strength of army, so army currently is around 12 lakh people and navy is less than 1 lakh. Right. Even if you add the coast guards, it will not cross the 1 lakh number.
Right.
So are we sufficiently, I would say, manned in the navy to take care of the coastal part, or do you think something needs to be done there?
So very quickly, Amit, this is the question you're asking me is numerical superiority. Man to man, whether in the army we have, let's say, 100 people, do we need the exact 100 number in naval parlance? The answer is no, because remember, by that logic, the Indian Air Force then would also require as many people to protect the skies. That's not true, because what you require with the Navy and the Air Force is equipment. And the equipment is in the form of either the Sukhoi 30s, Rafales, or by way of aircraft carriers. point I was making right at the start is that the naval presence that the Indian Navy has is amongst the very best to take care of any kind of threat that happens in the Indian Ocean region. So with the current set of submarines, the 2 aircraft carriers that will operate by the Indians, the superior destroyers, the frigates, we are in a very, very strong position when it comes to superiority on the seas. It doesn't need to have the same number of people.
Yeah, got it. Yeah. Thank you.
We have some questions and sorry.
I'll take a few of the questions. There are a lot of questions on Zoom as well as on Facebook.
Okay.
Before I start taking the questions, there's a comment by Mr. Sushil Agarwal which says that why are we calling China a disputed territory? Sushil ji, please be assured, and China, India, Arunachal was, is, and always will remain a very, very integral part of India. We're not.
So let me clarify. Pallav. What I was trying to say is disputed in the eyes of the Chinese, not disputed in the eyes of the Indians. Same thing. The Home Minister has gone and said, Aksai Chin hamara hai, Gilgit-Baltistan hamara hai. So you please try and understand कि किसके context में ये बात हो रही है.
So there is a very interesting question from Sahil. He asked whether this current aggressiveness is actually is a tactic to actually take away the world's sights from what's happening in Hong Kong and mishandling of China.
Yes and no. Yes and no. See, there is, okay, let me start with this. The biggest thing that is going to happen in November is the US election, right? And the Trump administration has been reasonably severe on the Chinese for now. And that's going to continue, primarily, as I explained, because of Huawei, etc. So the Chinese are left with very little maneuverability, and they have 2-3 fronts open. One is the US. Second is the coronavirus and the way the world has come together to kind of counter China right now and blame it for the virus. The third is its problem in Hong Kong. And the fourth is its inability to kind of go through with the $1.5 trillion of projects that are up and running. So it's kind of on 4 fronts that the issue is right now. Whether it is a deflection of their current crisis, I'm not sure, because Xi Jinping apparently has made himself now, his philosophy is now being taught in schools. It's like, ab mere bare mein tum log school mein seekho. That's where he's reached. So for now, he seems in a very strong position, but the world is coming together to oppose it.
Yeah. So taking it forward, so there's another question which says that China is touted to replace US as the next economic power, but destructive political tussles that it has with various countries, including the recent COVID fiasco. Do you think that the world will actually come together? Saying one thing and coming together in reality is actually different. So,
no, please, it is coming together for many, many reasons. The coronavirus has probably been a bigger inflection point because I think the mishandling, etc., most countries. So there's one country I want to give an example of, the Germans. The Germans are still kind of very, very they're not taken on the Chinese head on as much as other European countries have. But, and which is why the Americans are pushing the Germans are not taking the pressure. They want to side with the Chinese. All of this, Pallav, is actually coming together step by step, dheere dheere. It's all starting to, it won't happen in a day. What I'm just trying to leave the audience with is that this entire complex issue is not about one night or one day. It is slightly protracted, and this time the Chinese are also at the back foot. It is an existential crisis for them.
Okay, there is a very critical question. I'm not sure whether you will have the answer for this.
Okay.
It's, from Mr. Giri Vaz, he says that most of the semiconductor chips which are made in Taiwan, but where does Taiwan get all this water from for making?
No, that's a good question. In fact,
I will just interject here. Girish Vaze industrialist from Kolhapur, and he is actually the largest when it comes to electrical switches.
Oops.
So he's also doing a lot of stuff on semiconductors, as well as
Yeah.
for the electric stations.
Right.
To come on the gas stations for charging. So
Yeah.
he's also a big player, and so he's very well connected with fabs in Taiwan as well.
Okay. So, Girishji, okay. So here is the thing, a little bit of a disclaimer. I am not I'm not the resident expert on the manufacturing process. What I've gathered through all of the books and the research I've done is that the manufacturing doesn't happen in that country in itself. So for example, the biggest manufacturers are the US, for example, Intel or TSMC, which is in Taiwan, but they don't manufacture everything on their shores. So TSMC may actually have a plant back in Arizona, and the US may actually have plants in Europe. So it's a very interconnected world in that sense. The Taiwanese foundry, the TSMC, is the largest manufacturer and the largest provider to China. TSMC has actually said no to providing those chips to the Huawei and to the Chinese government, which is where the whole problem has started. So it's not necessary that they have to have onshore facility and capability because it's spread all over the world. Oh, by the way, sorry, just one quick point. It's not as if the Chinese don't have the capacity to manufacture. So please don't get me wrong. They spend billions of dollars creating the capacity, but to be the world's largest importer at 60%, and then to create the capacity to replace that facility, that's where the problem is.
So there's a very interesting question from Mr. Rajendra Jog. He says that, do you think China will disintegrate like Russia did, the USSR did in the past? It's a dream. We all want that to happen, but is it possible?
So please remember my Chinese map. If you recollect the Chinese map, I showed you there's a proper China, so to speak. Then there's part of Mongolia that they took, and then there's Tibet that they took. So China is anyway amalgamation of 3 different components which they put together. And if we have to believe the current government in India, they want Aksai Chin back, and obviously Tibet is vulnerable. So I'm not saying that it will be a breakup, but who knows in the future that those demands are taken up more seriously. On the question of the USSR, it's a very pertinent point. Very few people spend time on the breakup of the Soviet Union. And I know we won't have too much time, but this is where the rogue ISI actually has to be complemented, because it's that agency, deep state agency, in my opinion, was one of the biggest reasons for the breakup of the Soviet Union.
Amit bhai, you had a question.
There's a...
Yeah, hi Karan. The question was that, was it in any which case possible not to avoid the one belt, one road without Kashmir not boiling? What would we have done if Kashmir was not what it is? And would have been any, what you can say, effort from India for this not to happen? So more of a general question.
No, so Amit, if Kashmir was not an issue, and if it was geographically with India, then one belt, one road wouldn't have happened, no? Because that road actually passes through Pakistan occupied Kashmir, it passes through Shaksgam Valley. All of that is now disputed, passes through that. So ideally then that OBA or BRI wouldn't have actually happened in the current way that it has happened. So the way that we have been able to, we are not, I think one of the things is, it's not as if India is saying that this infrastructure you've created actually belongs to me.
Yeah, so the question was that then would that probably go to a warlike situation if we had control over Kashmir?
Oh, by the way, in my opinion, we're already at war. We're already at war. Cyber and electromagnetic trade, all of that is happening. And the situation is delicate. Situation is delicate in that sense. If Kashmir was not an issue, would we have sided with OBOR? I think that's the way I'm understanding the question, that we have sided with. Well, we were the 174th country or at least the one that we didn't, we were the very few countries that didn't go for the BRI. My guess is probably yes, sided.
Okay, and there is one technical question, Pallav, sorry, and then we can move to Janak Bhai. Finger 2 and finger 4 in Galwan Valley, any inputs or knowledge on that? That was one of the questions which came up.
Finger 4 and finger 8, sorry.
Finger 4 and
So what? So if you all remember, what I had shown in the map was the Daulat Beg Oldie Airport, which was at just the last point towards Siachen. What has happened is India is making almost made the strategic road which connects movement of heavy equipment to Daulat Beg Oldie that passes through the Galwan Valley. Those areas that you mentioned are places from where you can look down on the road.
Okay.
So you get a strategic advantage, and you then have fire oversight. You can fire just like Kargil. The reason why the Pakistanis came to Kargil was to cut off the Leh-Srinagar highway. They have the same intention. They have the same intention here. So you have direct fire pushed back, or at least pushed back, so the road remains clear. And by the way, the road is ready now.
Sure. Yeah.
Janak, you had a question?
Yeah, so I just wanted to check with you, Karan. You made a statistic, or you gave a statistic which said that there were 6,024 attacks between 1994 to 2013. Now, 2013 to today, has that number dropped substantially? And if so, what is the number? You have some idea on that?
Yeah, dramatically dropped. Not just dropped; it's just dramatically dropped. I've been barring Pathankot, which came into, let's say, that also was an attack on the Indian Air Force facility. Barring Pathankot, there has been not a single attack on a civilian, on a city or a civilian area outside of Srinagar. And when I say Srinagar, I meant largely, let's say, Pulwama or attacks on the Indian Army. Outside of that, there's, to my mind, in the last 6 years, not a single attack that has happened. Now, Janak Bhai, one of the big reasons for that is also the fact that you have to create an infrastructure to avoid getting hit by the 20 stones that coming your way. Right? So I think the government has kind of put together that infrastructure, and intelligence sharing with the Americans and the Israelis has gone up quite sharply, to my mind.
There's a question from Mr. Anamika. Anamika ma'am is asking whether, how do you think will the India-US relations go forward, given what's happening with China?
Yeah, Anamika, now that's a really important question, and this is where the world will start to change for India. Now remember, all of us have been brought up with the notion of non-alignment. Right? So as a country, we've always said कि हम non-aligned हैं, ना इधर ना उधर, हम बीच में अपना path खुद choose करेंगे. I think the time for this country has come to choose sides, and it's important to choose sides and choose them carefully. My guess is that our relationship, now just look at the fascinating world right now. We are very close with Americans, so we are buying Apaches, we're buying defense equipment for the Americans. We are now getting into a relationship called the Quad with the Americans, the Japanese, the Australians. But the beauty is that we are also buying S-400, very, very sophisticated missile systems from the Russians. And we are getting Israeli Heron drones. And we are good with the Australians. And and Modi ji gets awards as the highest citizen award from the UAE. Now, if you see what's happening on the foreign affairs, actually the country is in a very, very good position, but we still have to choose sides. I just think that for now, India will come together on the Quad.
There's a question from Sanjay Poddar. He is asking whether the Chinese expansionist policy is to raise nationalism feeling among the suppressed population of the country and continue the CPC rule in China.
Yes, possible.
They don't have a choice.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but it's also difficult to believe that the population at large is. See, remember that they've had their per capita income has gone over. over the last 20 years. So they're dealing with a separate set of issues. Actually, then for them, the number one issue is economic existence right now. And that is where the whole problem starts to emerge. Because they've also said by 2050, they want to be the world's number one power. When you cannot do that, it actually puts you in a tougher spot.
Okay, I'll take the last question and I'll hand it over to Amit Bhai. This question, you say that India is doing pretty well on the foreign policy front, but the political situation is now, our relations with Nepal and Sri Lankan government has actually gone a little worse. So what's your view on that?
So in the immediate neighborhood, and remember that when the government came into power, they said two things. First thing they said is look east. And that look east has been look east within the country and keep looking east beyond the boundaries. That's really come through very beautifully in the last 4 to 5 years. But remember also what has happened is the country that we tend to overlook is Myanmar, Burma. It had zero access to us. We recently, I think 2 years or 3 years ago, we conducted cross-border surgical strikes in conjunction with the government back in Burma. The infiltration has come down from there. So there are 1 or 2 nations where we've had issues, but we've also gained a lot. Maldives are already almost gone, but it's come back in the fold. Sri Lanka with the Rajapaksa government had almost gone. It's come back in the fold. Bangladesh has come back in the fold. You're left with Pakistan was never there in the first place. You're left with Nepal, which I think is actually more of a political issue, not necessarily a country becoming hostile to you.
Amit Bhai.
Yeah, so Karan, thank you for the lovely session. In fact, we also at Sapient are looking east. That's why we have Calcutta, Guwahati and Tejpur.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So they're actually doing well for us. And even Ghatkopar East we have also. So I think, thank you. Fabulous session. A lot of feedback, very positive. And these things are not taught anywhere.
Yes.
It's like civics is 20 marks in the curriculum. That's why we don't have civic sense. Similarly, is always of Shivaji and Mughals and Britishers.
Right.
So current affairs is not a topic which many people have in their curriculum today. I think people will go back with very much valuable information for what you have brought to table today. And I have got, Pallav, I have got a small song to end the session, and then we can probably log out. So just bear me out for a minute.
Yeah.
Pallav, are you able to see the screen?
Couldn't see it on the screen, but heard it and felt really good.
So, it is always that first you have to bow down to your mother in your house and then to the country. So Vande Mataram for us on the Independence Day is very much necessary. So thank you very much, Karan, and thank you, Pallav, for getting this organized. Whatever feedback, Karan, and whatever questions, we'll
Amit sir is the curator, sir, so don't thank you.
But thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Right.
And the timing is perfect.
Thank you, Karan sir. Thank you, Amit Basu sir, for curating.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thanks.
Thank you, Karan. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye, Dhruv.
Thanks, Karan.
Thank you.